Hi, everybody. We are going to cover Chapter 6 on adolescence and Chapter 7 on emerging adulthood. And I'll have, I think, a reading or two about later stages in life. I feel a little bit bad because one of the things in developmental psychology is how so much of it focuses on like our earliest childhood through like young adulthood, basically. And that there's like just not any research done on middle age. There is some, but it's like vastly outweighed by the research done on the earliest stages of life. And then I do the same thing in my class. I tell you all about the youngest years, and then kind of gloss over the older years. But whatever, we're running out of time, so I want to get to the most interesting stuff. Um, and then we'll call it a semester. I do have an article. I might do a writing assignment too. That would be like very kind of relaxed writing assignment, and not like a super long article. Just to give people some points. It was brought to my attention that a few students would really like the opportunity to have a pretty easy writing assignment for some easy points. So I think that could probably happen. Now, granted, it'll be work, but it's easy points. So um, I'll say something about that this coming week and give you that article. But really, we just have like 2 weeks left, so gotta get some stuff done. Let's talk about adolescence. I'm gonna kind of cruise through like a lot of the stuff here, and we'll see where I end up doing ranting about different topics. But for the most part, I'm gonna cruise through slides. So just pause it if you need to like write down something on the slide. Just pause and write down. But I'm not gonna like give you time to write. I'm going to cruise through slides. Let's get done with this semester. Let's go on summer break. Adolescence. Obviously, people are getting bigger. This is like the time, like you have your growth spurt. Girls, that's happening at a younger age than boys, to the point that the average girl, at least I believe in the United States, I don't know if this is worldwide, average girl or young woman is taller than the average boy or young man between the ages of 10 and 14. I remember this time in my life. Every girl was taller than me, which is totally fine. It just is like funny to think about, and I'm like pretty short dude, so um, yeah, it was what it was. Let's see. We're going through puberty, sexual maturation, distal proximal growth. So think about, so this is an important term here. Distal proximal means from further out to closer together, meaning that our limbs, our hands are growing sooner. They're maturing faster than like anything closer to our core. This is why teenagers look so goddamn goofy. They got such big hands and like awkward looking limbs and stuff. It's why they trip over themselves all the time. Not saying I'll do that, but like there's a look when people are going through their growth spurt. Their limbs are maturing faster than their body, and it can cause confusion to the brain such that you don't know how to use these bigger limbs you have and such, and you end up tripping over yourself and just being kind of in that awkward teenage phase. That's like contributes to that. This distal proximal growth contributes to that. Forming primary and secondary sex characteristics, so just maturing sexually. There's been some changes in puberty, like historical context for change. So this is kind of an interesting statistic. 100 years ago, in the United States and Europe, and I think it's important that those two areas. 100 years ago, average age of first period was 16 for girls, compared to around 13 now. And I think latest research shows even younger than that, like as the average age. And so this has been like a cause for concern for people in the medical community. Like, what has been happening? Why have girls been reaching sexual maturation at a younger and younger age? The best theory on it, to me at least, is that diets have improved substantially. Nutrition in general has improved substantially. Now, you may be thinking like, well, I've said a bunch in this class that people kind of eat like crap and there's all these problems with childhood obesity. True. I wonder if that, in what way that's contributing. I don't know. The general theory for the decrease in sexual maturation of women is that there's just been better access to nutrition. But now we have, over the last 2 to 3 decades, like worse nutrition in some ways, just higher, more sugar, more fats, that sort of thing, more processed foods, that sort of thing. So I don't know what effect that is having. If somebody would like to look up that and bring it to my attention, I would love it. But just know that this trend is continuing, or is happening. Gender role intensification. So just the physical changes can accentuate gender role differences, primarily for young women. There was some interesting research I saw, something that young women tend to have to deal with that young men would never. It doesn't cross their mind. The research was on, it was just asking young women at what age they first notice like men like staring at them, like sexually, essentially, like checking them out, I guess would be like the colloquial term. And it is amazing and creepy as hell that like the average age is like 12 that girls notice that like men are checking them out. Which is like, men, what the hell is your problem? Quit. Stop. Just don't. So, I mean, that can lead to all sorts of, like, I mean, if you're at such a young age, but you notice that men are looking at you like you're older than that, like, that can lead to all sorts of, like, self-consciousness and, like, really make your gender, make you self-aware of your gender. And then the gender stereotypes that go along with that, what women should and should not do. And I mean, men face these same things. What's manly? What's considered masculine? What should men do? How should men treat women? How should men treat others? So when we start maturing, go through our growth spurt, reach sexual maturity, that's when these things come much more into focus for people. So then you start being aware of how gender stereotypes can impact your own life. And it's something I've talked a lot about in this class, that for women especially, just faced with so much expectations about gender and what women can and can't do, what we call prescriptive and proscriptive judgments, that we tend to see women exit fields that have traditionally been dominated by men. So that's why it could be a contributing reason why we have like gender disparities in STEM fields, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. Could be a contributor to disparities in like a lot of in healthcare specifically, and like being a physician, the type of physician you'd become if you're in that. Men and women are pushed into certain practices in that regard. And these affect men too. Gender stereotypes affect men. Could be one of the reasons why we have such a shortage of men in fields like nursing and education, because they're not considered. They are considered more like feminine fields. Why? I don't know. I mean, I do know, actually. I did my dissertation research on this. But a lot of it is just the social constructions of our ideas about who should be doing what. Now, there are definitely, actual gender differences in men and women that may suit them better for one career or another. But oftentimes people feel like they also need to conform to those stereotypes, regardless of what they actually want to do. Maybe not even consciously, but people feel pushed or pulled in certain directions. In brain development, a brain is fully grown once you get to around the age of puberty. You have increased myelination for more efficient processing, decreased plasticity. So now when you do get an injury or anything happens to your brain, it's going to take longer to recover from that. You have decreased plasticity in the sense that it's much more difficult now to learn a second language. Or if you have damage to that area of the brain, it's harder to regain language. Synaptic pruning continues, so again, making the brain more efficient. You make the connection between your two hemispheres more efficient. through the thickened corpus callosum. That's just this nerve bundle of, like, I don't know, 250 million nerves that connects your two hemispheres together. And you start to have increased connections from the hippocampus to the frontal lobe. Hippocampus being its primary function is for memory. Our frontal lobe is primarily used for decision making, our executive functions. So what this is saying is that we are relying more on memory to inform our decisions, which is a good thing. We're learning. We learn from experience. Having better connections, more efficient connections from our hippocampus to our frontal lobes makes us more able to learn from our experiences. And that's this is like the formation of wisdom. Not saying teenagers have much wisdom, except for college students who are still teenagers. You all do. You're getting all to be the age of, you're definitely young adults now, most people in college. But in the teenage years, you're starting to form, having your memories more influence your decision making, which can lead to making more wise decisions to an extent. But then we have all these other things that are going on too. We have increased risk taking, so our dopamine production peaks. We're going to get the most the best highs from activities that bring us joy. Dopamine's just going to be surging. We're still developing our prefrontal cortex at this time, our part of our brain that's used for decision making, but our amygdala is fully formed, meaning that our emotional responses can the amygdala is responsible for our emotional responses. So having a fully formed amygdala means that part of the brain that's responsible for our emotional processing is going to be activated and fully functioning, so we are more emotional and not able to rein that in as much with our prefrontal cortex. What's this about? Changes in the brain make it more a critical period for development of mental illnesses. So you get so much going on here. The continuation of making connections more efficient. Sometimes there's just problems with that. Also, all the things that go along with being a teenager can also lead to development of mental illnesses, and also substances that you introduce that may disrupt any brain processes can also contribute to mental illness. So find that I think this is over lifespan, that 50% of people who experience a mental illness will do so by age 14 and 75% by age 24. So kind of a critical period for development. And we find with marijuana in particular, so there's a particular reason that we mentioned marijuana. So there are two critical time periods in our life where okay, let me rewind this a little bit. So I'm thinking of one mental disorder in particular, schizophrenia. There's two critical time periods in our life when we are likely where there's causes that may contribute to eventually having schizophrenia. The first being the first trimester after conception. So at a point when we can't control anything, and maybe it's something about what the mother's engaging in that would lead to something in fetal development that would make us more susceptible to having schizophrenia as an adult. The other critical period is our adolescent years, and specifically marijuana use has been shown to be associated with developing schizophrenia in adulthood. If you smoke pot, essentially, as a teenager, you put yourself much more at risk for developing schizophrenia and other mental health disorders in adulthood, which is kind of freaky because, teenagers just are much more impulsive, like to fit in with their friend group, social group, if they're hanging out with people who are doing any activities. Not saying it's these are bad kids or anything. It's just like what teenagers do. but you're putting yourself at such a greater risk for developing a mental health disorder. So beware. Wait till you're an adult, kids. Like 30 or so. And then you just won't want to do that anymore because you got other things going on in life. Adolescents sleep a lot. You need a lot of sleep. You're growing so much, so it just takes more. Sleep is a time of rejuvenation and growth, and a lot of our brain is we're consolidating memories and cleaning out toxins in the brain, all that stuff. So it makes sense that you're going through so much growth. You need more sleep. I know as a teenager, I could easily sleep 10 hours, no problem. My circadian rhythms are all messed up. I'd be going to bed at 6 a.m. and sleep until 4 p.m. and ridiculous stuff like that. But most adolescents don't get enough sleep for a variety of reasons. One of those reasons being that circadian rhythms are just different. We're not, with all the different hormone production, everything going on in life, we're just not able to get on like a normal circadian rhythm, which makes teenagers tend to be, like, more often than not, teenagers are night owls. Just naturally, you're going to stay up later. Well, that's a problem for the rest of adult society because things tend to start at pretty early in the morning. Most schools have start times before 8:30 a.m. If schools were to more consider the neurobiology of adolescents, they'd probably have a much later start time. Start at 9:30, start at 10. They'd be better serving their students. But so many students are neurobiologically wired to stay up later and need 8 to 10 hours of sleep, and some more than that. An average only getting 7.5. So you have this consistent sleep deficit. And I mean, the thing with sleep deficit is you can't make that up on the weekends. Like, it doesn't work like that. You can't just sleep more when you get the chance. No, you're going to have the effects of the sleep deficit. So you're going to have decreased executive functions. You're going to be making dumber decisions, more impulsivity, less ability to pay attention, all these different things, because we have this social expectation or societal expectation that we wake up early and get ourselves to school. This did not work with me. I was not a good high school student at all. I think largely because of this. And maybe you have experienced the same things. Same thing. I mean, a lot of you are still you're not adolescents anymore. You're young adults, but doesn't mean you still don't need that 8.5 hours or 8 to 10 hours. And you're probably getting less for a variety of reasons, and your circadian rhythms are still messed up like a teenager's. So, maybe don't take 8 a.m. classes unless it's my class. Take that, because it'll be fun. Actually, every time I teach an 8 a.m. class, it's just horrible because, like, half the class doesn't come every day, and it's just because people can't get themselves out of bed. I know it, I understand it, but what are you gonna do? Teens have sex. Not too surprising, I guess. Here's some stats on that. By the end of high school, I guess half of teens have sex. 50% of teens have had sex, and pregnancy rate here is higher in the U.S. than most developed countries, because the U.S. is also kind of weird about sex, and especially a place like Texas where they have abstinence-only education, so they don't actually teach a lot of teenagers about proper birth control and all that stuff. Probably a little bit of a problem. What's this graph saying here? Birth rates per 1,000 females aged 15 to 19 by race and Hispanic ethnicity. So, green line, non-Hispanic, black. Okay, so this shows an overall trend. So there's some differences between ethnicities, but an overall trend that there's been decreasing teenage pregnancies over the last 3 decades or so. Now, this hasn't been updated lately, but I imagine those trends are continuing. saying that we probably are getting a bit better with things like sex education, but that there are disparities between groups as well. So something to keep in mind here. Different risk factors for teen pregnancies, parental and child closeness, parental supervision, if there's not much of it, parents' values towards sex and unprotected sex. Of course, your parents are going to influence you. Residing in dangerous or disorganized neighborhoods, which is probably also linked to like parental supervision. Low SES family, which is also quite related to living in I guess more dangerous neighborhoods. Single parent homes, probably related to parental supervision. If you're not able to keep an eye on your children because you're working and such, that can lead to them just spending time with others. Older sexually active siblings, so just learning things from your siblings. Early puberty, not sure what the connection there is exactly. I guess you're just reaching sexual maturity. Younger age, being a victim of sexual abuse, another risk factor. And we try to, it's not a good thing usually if teenagers are having babies. Not to say, I know plenty of people that have had that. My high school had quite the number of childbirths while I was there, and they're fine now. You grow into that role a lot of times, and if you have a supportive family and all of that, it can be a positive thing in the end. But typically it's something you want to try to prevent because of the consequences that a lot of people don't graduate from high school. You don't graduate from high school, you're limiting your prospects, limiting your social mobility. Also, just having to take care of children and maybe not having a degree, a high school degree, or being able to go to college or anything like that, limiting your prospects, much more likely to be a single mother for mothers. And, single mothers are much more common than single fathers. The mothers typically end up with the babies. So 75% of teen mothers are in public assistance within 5 years. So societally as well, we pay out for that through our tax dollars and such. And not to say we shouldn't, we definitely should be, because we have to make sure people are taken care of and have the basic needs and everything. But the best thing you can do is try to lower teen pregnancy in general. Child is 50% more likely to repeat a grade, perform worse on standardized tests, and drop out for finishing high school. So that makes sense too, that we see these generational effects of that. Mother has a kid at such a young age, is not fully like cognitively developed herself, maybe doesn't have a supportive family, maybe comes from low SES background and just doesn't have that safety net support structure in place, and has to work a job, probably a job with an odd schedule and stuff like that, so isn't there herself for the child. I'm not saying this is always the case. I'm saying that in general we see these trends. So don't think I'm singling out any mothers in the class, especially who have had children at a young age. Not at all. I know a lot of people who have been in that situation, and a lot of times it turns out just fine. It's just we tend to see these trends as a whole, and it's something to be aware of. And again, the best thing you can do is probably try to prevent adolescent pregnancy. For fathers, 70% of fathers without a high school diploma fathered their first child before the age of 25. So not having a high school diploma was a predictor of being a young father. Only 14% who fathered first child before 25 got a bachelor's degree. So yeah, if you're taking care of a kid and having to pay out child support and all that, like school, higher education to provide for a family, or at least provide for your child, offer that financial support, you're going to be out in the workforce to do that. So education is probably going to take a back seat. Okay, I'm going to end it there today. I'm going to finish up this. I thought I could do this whole chapter in one go, but it's 27 slides total. I'm about halfway through. I will stop there and finish this up soon. Bye, everybody.